Hey guys, we got a question from Tara who asks about medical directors and how does it work with ordering medications and IV fluids. So this is a really great question, and it's something that definitely has to be addressed if you're starting an IV hydration business. So if you're a nurse in all 50 states, you must have a medical director. Now, that medical director can be any physician, okay, so MD or DO. You cannot have a medical director who is a dentist or a chiropractor or a podiatrist. They do not meet the criteria. So the medical director has to be a physician, any physician, and they can work in any area. Now, I would say that it would be very helpful to have a medical director who has some understanding of IV hydration, because otherwise you're going to have to train them. You may have to train them in business, you may have to train them in IV hydration therapies and what you're doing. And some physicians are fine with that, and some are just, that makes them very anxious and stressed out. So it's definitely something to discuss with your medical director. Now, you cannot have a resident or a fellow, they can't be your medical director. In some states where nurse practitioners can work independently, you can have the nurse practitioner as your medical director. And the same goes for nurse practitioners who practice independently. They don't need a medical director if they are the only one on their license, if they can order medications on their own. One of the issues that comes up is when you go to buy supplies like IV hydration bags and medications like Zofran and Toradol and all that kind of stuff, the vendors want to see a physician's license on file, right? You can't purchase anything until there is a license on file for a provider. Now, in certain independent states like New Mexico and Arizona, they've had independence for some time. The nurse practitioner can simply call up and say, hey, I'm in an independent state. But in certain states like New York or Delaware, where the nurse practitioner gains her independence after a certain amount of time, this gets a little sketchier. So definitely look into it and see if your nurse practitioner can even get into these vendors to get his or her license on file, because you can't order anything until it's on file. Now, the role of the medical director, whether it's an NP or a physician, is to write your standing orders. You need standing orders, just like when you're in the hospital and a patient is admitted, you have standing orders, like put an IV in, hook them up to telemetry if that's the unit you're in, whatever it is, you can get the ball rolling because you have standing orders. Now, what happens is that at the end of the month, the physicians go through all those charts. Now it's electronic, but they used to go through it paper-wise, and they sign all the charts. And it's the same thing in your clinic. Now, each state is different, and the rules are changing, so you do have to look into whether you need a provider on staff or in the clinic. There are certain states where professional corporations need to be established, and those they can be somewhat more difficult, or there's more rules to go over. So you're going to have to look into your state, and we're going to post what we can find in terms of state information here on this channel. However, the role then of the medical director is to write these standing orders. So let's say you have, I don't know, you're doing plain IV fluids. Let's say you're doing a hangover drip, right? So you have IV fluids plus Toradol and Zofran and whatever goes into that particular bag of fluids. You would have a standing order and just call it, this is the hangover standing order fluids. So when a patient comes in and says, I want that hangover drip, then you just take out that standing order. You're able to offer that drip to the patient, and then the doctor will sign it, whether you establish, they'll sign daily or weekly or monthly, whatever you decide with your medical director. So it runs that same way. Now, let's say the patient comes in and says, I want the hangover drip, plus I want X amount of units of vitamin D and this and that and the other thing, and that's not on the standing orders. Then you would have to call and get a verbal order to do that. And in many cases, the physician's going to want to know about the patient, know why they want these things, and they might ask some additional clearance questions. So that is really the role of your medical director. And like I said, in states, it's going to vary state to state to state. Some states are more lax, some states are more rigid, and it's really just figuring out what the medical director needs to do. Now, the nice thing about working with Nursepreneurs and in our program is that we have partnered with medical directors. So it's a company called Doctors for Providers. They have physicians, medical directors in all 50 states. They know the rules and regulations. The really nice thing about working with them is that they are affordable, which is a huge deal, right? And they are also well trained. Their physicians are knowledgeable about IV hydration, so they almost serve as an additional mentor for you. So instead of you having to try and explain everything to some random physician who thinks it sounds like a good idea, you're actually working with a physician who has run IV hydration before, knows about this area, and is well versed in your state laws and knows what it needs to get done. Now, they're not going to serve as legal counsel for you. That's one of those things that in business you always need legal counsel, and it's just something that you have to pay for. It's just one of those, it's like, fixing the electric in your house. It stinks. You don't want to spend money on it, but it's got to be done. And it's the same with legal counsel in a business like this. You're going to have to budget some money for legal counsel. Okay, I hope this answers some questions about medical directors. Please drop your questions in the comment section below, and we're going to keep on this topic talking about the various state regulations. So stay tuned and keep watching.